Okay. Good morning, everybody, and we'll call the board of the special board meeting of the West Basin Water District. So we have a determination.
Yeah, echo.
General manager.
Echo.
I apologize, Mr. President. I think we are now ready.
We didn't start yet,
We just had a bit of an echo.
so did the call the board. Nation report.
Director Scott Houston.
Here.
Director Don Deere.
Here.
Director Gloria Gray.
Here.
Director Harold Williams.
Here.
President Desi Alvarez.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Are there any public comments today?
President Alvarez, we have not received any requests for public comment for today's special board meeting, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to make public comment, now would be the time to do so. If you could please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. And I do not see any requests for public comment.
Okay, there are no presentations today. So we are going to move to the information calendar, proceed with budget workshop. Director Gray is joining us virtually today, and she can only be here for an hour. Budget workshop is the main purpose of the meeting, so we'll begin with that.
Thank you very much, President Alvarez. The item before you on the information calendar, item 6A, is fiscal year 24-25 budget workshop number 3. And this is related to our CIP, the Capital Improvement Program. This does begin on packet page 27, and the presentation begins on packet page 29. I'll begin today's presentation, but as always, we do have our staff on hand to answer any questions as we move through the presentation. Leading the discussion ultimately be our Chief Financial Officer, Winnie Nakamura, but we also have Barkov Nasirlian, our Executive Manager of Engineering and Operations, for the technical portion of the presentation. If you can turn to packet page 30. You can see, obviously, our mission to provide a safe and reliable supply of high-quality water to the communities that we serve. Our mission is discussed and looked at every time we make a recommendation or a decision internally and, of course, with our board of directors. Just turn to packet page 31. This is our agenda for today. Our budget workshop schedule. We'll recap that. We'll discuss all of the feedback from our April 27th workshop. Then we'll discuss our CIP budget challenges and opportunities. And then we'll begin with our fiscal year 24-25 capital improvement program budget priority projects. Moving then to our fiscal year 24-25 capital improvement projects or other projects, we'll outline those. And we'll provide an overview of the 5-year CIP spending. And then we'll provide some funding options for these projects. Back to page 32. So this is where we are in our proposed budget workshop schedule. You can see that we did meet on April 6th, then again on April 27th. Our last workshop was with our customers on May 1st, and we are now at May 15th. You can see that we've always included a potential meeting on May 30th. We can discuss that later in the workshop. I do anticipate additional cuts being identified by staff, and I would like the opportunity to present that to the board before any decisions are made on the budget. So we may want to look at that May 30th meeting as a real potential. Also remembering that our fiscal year does end at the very end of June. So we are required to pass a budget by then. And then I also wanted to note that one issue that has come up, and I do know that our refinery customers do track our budget meetings as well as our committee and board meetings. It has been brought to my attention that in the past, we've not always provided written notification of change of rates with our refinery customers. As you all know, our commodity charges for our reports are all based off of contractual requirements We are in the process of preparing written notice, but I also want to stress that we are also communicate all of these workshops to our refineries. Several of them participate in the West Basin Water Association, and we've been discussing our workshops through that means. But then in all of our meetings and our notification of these meetings, we notify the refineries there as well. So they should be very well aware of what we're looking at. But it's important to note that any rate increase that we look at, really, you have to look at the contract, because the contract dictates the commodity charge that we assess our refinery customers.
Thank you for the clarification.
We go to packet page ultimately 34. So we like to highlight this at each of our meetings. You can see there, we did include the fiscal year 23 and 24 projected spending. We're at $64,307,932. We did highlight the budget that was adopted last year at $73.3 million. On the 27th, we did propose a budget of 69.8, almost 69.9 million. That was a decrease from our original proposed budget of 72.4 million. And just in these last week and a half, we have identified an additional 302,000 in cuts. And so we're now down at 69.5. You can see there that we highlighted the adjustments that were made, and we'll go through those in a little bit more detail here in a minute. If you can turn to packet page 35. Now, this slide was prepared in response to some comments that were made at the last workshop, looking at the projected spending and utilizing a simplistic, 5 and 10% over what our projected spending would be. We did include this in our presentation because we wanted to be responsive. You can see that the 10% projected expenses, or 10% more than our projected expenses, would be roughly 70 million or 70.7 million. And we are beneath that. I believe we're roughly at 8.2% increase over our projected spending. And again, I do want to highlight that we do have expenses in this fiscal budget that were not included, obviously, in last year's budget or projected. Those, the most significant one, of course, is the cost of our county elections, but also there's a number of outreach events for projects that have been deferred because they're not. We'll highlight that as we go through this presentation.
We also highlight that if you look at the 5% projection, we're over. To the 10%.
Correct. Yeah, we are at 8.2. If we can go to now packet page 36. So here we're going through several of the items that were reduced. You can see that there is a reduction in chemicals. You can see also utilities are down 209,000. The solids management, roughly 21,000. And then the secondary effluent at 1,700. A lot of this is due to a reduced projected production of our water recycling efforts. And you can see also that there's an overhead allocation reduction of just over 34,000 for a total of 247,764. If you turn to packet page 37. So this is our public information and education. We've also made adjustments here. You can see the first and foremost was the water harvest. We reduced that by 15,000. It is worth noting that our total proposed budget now is 168,000. I do hope and anticipate that we'll be beneath that. We mentioned at our last workshop that we really worked with our regional partners, agencies, and contractors, and we were able to maximize our sponsorships for the water harvest event. We actually, last year was the most we've ever received in sponsorships. You can see there in the projected spending for this past fiscal year, we were down to 150,000. That was due to a combination of those sponsorships as well as our MAA funds through Metropolitan Water District. It's important to note that none of that funding is guaranteed. We always ask, and we will continue to get out there and request sponsors for this next year. But there is no guarantee, obviously, of that. The MAA funds depending on the year and the fiscal year, Metropolitan Water District has always worked with its member agencies to broaden the scope of what they could fund. But there, again, is no guarantee on that. You can see that the water exploration, the school tours, there was a $10,000 reduction, but I think that was just a reallocation, a movement of those funds. So out of there, but you'll see that elsewhere. And you can see that there's a reduction of our overhead allocation of 24,000 for a total of 32,945.
If I can interrupt, and I think as we go through, we may have questions.
Of course.
Probably better to answer our questions as they come up. So overall here, currently we're spending 3.5 million. Your proposed revisions is still showing 4.9 million, which is almost a 40% increase. Seems very low. The biggest difference is in the district labor and overhead allocation. Why is that so much more than the current expenditure?
Well, the district overhead and then, basically part of the election cost, the $800,000 is in the overhead pool. So we allocated the $800,000, into different operating programs such as recycling, and then PI is one of them. And then as far as district labor and benefit, we showed you there's a total $11 million district labor and overhead that have to be allocated to each single program. And what happened in the currently, because of in the current year, we have several positions that is vacant for a very long time. That's why you see the current year district labor and benefit is actually much lower than we budgeted.
If I could add to.
Okay, so just for clarification. So for the overhead, you distributed the $800,000 for the election cost to all of the different categories. So did you do that on a percentage basis of the amount of that particular line item?
Yeah, it's based on the percentage, yes.
Okay, so that's still, if that's the reason, I'm not quite sure that explains the $700,000 increase. 900, over the current $900,000.
Well, like I said, our current the $900,000, because when we have currently in the current year we've been saving a lot of money. There's a lot of programs that district wise we do not do. That's why our current overhead cost $900,000 is actually lower than the 1.4 because we've been cutting down our expenses as well.
And we are in one of those situations where it's critical that we continue to look at our expenses and keep them at a minimum. So if we can operate where we're operating now, why such a big increase? Part of the rationale you gave me, almost all the rationale you gave me, was that it would be given the additional cost that we have to incur this year for the election, and that's distributed through all the accounts. If that's distributed through all the accounts, $800,000 over a dozen plus different programs doesn't add up to $800,000 on any one program.
Director Hours, we can provide you with a line item out because it's important to note that with our public information and education, we did have a staff member leave. That position was held vacant for some time. We did fill that, and we are now fully staffed at the public information and education. So there were savings this past year in our projected, but you're going to see that this next year. Secondly, when we look at our programs and our projects and our specific overhead and money that we dedicate to our public information, we have had a significant increase as far as all of the staff members throughout the district that dedicate time to our outreach efforts. So when we allocate our overhead, a lot of that goes into these different things that we're funding.
I'm addressing the answer that I was given. that we're distributing an $800,000 new one-time charge. We have to make sure every time we have an election, whatever the county's gonna charge. And that's distributed throughout the program. So when I look at the number of programs, even when I take consideration that it would be distributed based on the size, monetary size of the program, it still doesn't explain that big jump.
I
So
think,
there are other reasons, and maybe we'll be able to provide those that you're saying that you're gonna give us more detail on. Want to see why. Again, we're spending this year, we managed to have a very good program this year. I don't find any criticism in what we've done. And we're saying that, well, even though we can get by with $3.5 million this year, we need 4.9 next year. That's a significant increase. That's not 5%. That's not even 10%. It's like 40%. So my concern is how much more is being programmed in there, and I just don't understand why that's just needed.
Well, there's a two study at the HR department. We're going to do the DEI is 75,000. And then we want to do the position study for 50,000. So that's 100, another 125,000 over there. And then we have a significant increase in the IT expenses for next year. So the IT expenses itself is about $900,000.
We have a different line item for IT. So, okay, we're moving
Yeah.
on to IT.
Yeah, so IT is also part of the overhead that we allocated to other programs as well.
Okay.
Okay, so EJ, you're on page 38.
as mentioned, public information, education expenses, we did make some adjustments. Again, primarily these adjustments are shifted to other budgets. But again, we're able to reduce the total overall budget. You can see that there is a reduction in the software licenses in the amount of 78,000, as well as a reduction in our telephone expense of 2,000. If you turn to packet page 39.
Okay, did we go back?
Oh, yeah.
We're down to that one. Again, we're spending 1.2 million this year. We're proposing to spend 1.7, 1.8 this coming year. Again, a significant increase. In this case, more than 50%, more than 60%. Why? What's the driver? What's it? I look at a couple of things here and I see software licenses. We're spending 780 this year versus 1.1 million. What software licenses are we talking about? It's not so much more.
Give the list.
Yeah, we do have a list. It's actually very long list.
You can provide that later.
Yes, we can provide that.
It's important to note that obviously not all of those are required to be renewed each year, the software licenses. Secondly, as advancements are being made in technology, obviously you need those upgrades as well. And I'll contact our IT department. Maybe we can have Isaiah join us. So if we can go to packet page 39, our human resources. You can see there that we do have some reductions in our recruitment, or excuse me, our training in the amount of 15,000. Our legal down to 20,000. Again, I point out that our legal expenses are projected. You can see, if you're going to compare the projected expenses this year compared to the expenses in future years, this is one category where we spent 1,000 this year. Any sort of issue that comes about will obviously cost more than 1,000, but we did budget $40,000, or excuse me, $20,000 for this next year. And then you can see that office administration, we did have a reduction of 7,850. And then last but not least, our memberships, a reduction of 3,900.
Okay, we're starting out with a budget of 122 and 144. So that's 120,000 increase, almost 100%. And that seems rather large compared to what we're spending this year. Again, we've done an adequate job this year. But one of the differences that I think we talked about a little bit last time, the class and comp, you're projecting to spend $50,000. I'm not supportive of that. I don't think that that's necessary at this time, and if that would be necessary, we probably wait 1 or 2 years, and the agency is in a better position.
May I interject, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So personally, I disagree with what you just said, and
It's your-
you have your opinion, and I think each of us has our opinion. So quite frankly, on that note, I think the full board should weigh in on that. Okay? Okay.
Okay, Director, here's,
Yes.
I said everybody should ask their questions and as we go through this, because there are gonna be issues,
I
so
understand that.
then make your comments.
I'm making my comments, but I don't appreciate if one director is telling our staff that he thinks that none of this should happen. So I do hope the other directors at some point weigh in because, you know, I think we should do the comps study this year. Now, but he's going to ask the staff to take it out of the budget, but that's a collective decision. So I'm just going to opine right now. We've already put that off years enough. So my colleagues, just don't let Director Alvarez be the deciding factor on all of this, the collective decision. Thank you.
I'd like to comment on that as well. And I take the position that there's no one director that directs us. Whenever we're together and we're discussing board business, we're all involved. When the chair speaks, the chair is merely giving his opinion. And his opinion is like all the other opinions. You know, their opinions. So don't feel that you have to accept everything that's being said by whomever the chair is, that's the gospel. It isn't. It's not the gospel until we as a group, 5 of us, or the majority, that's the gospel. Okay? So don't be irritated or think you have to bow down to whomever the chair is. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could comment as well. I completely understand your perspective, and trust me when I say throughout this past year, we've looked at every opportunity to reduce costs whenever and wherever possible. The $50,000 that is included there is a projected expense. We're going to do, again, everything we can to come under that. The class and comp study is something that has been delayed for a couple of years now. It's been a part of each of our strategic plans, and that's the reason why we're including it. I will work with the HR. We've already talked about how we'll procure those services if it gets included and approved in the budget. But again, I stress that we will find ways to cut costs whenever possible. You can see that where we are in our projected expenses that you're highlighting today, a large part of that is due to staff's efforts to reduce our costs whenever possible. And so we're comparing it to the projected expenses. But we do need to budget conservatively as far as what those expenses could and might be. So that's the reason for the $50,000. But ultimately, as noted, it is a board decision, and staff will respond accordingly.
Right. So the comments, Director Houston raised a good point. I'm making my comment, and everyone else should make their comment
Right.
as we move along. Right. Just for my part, I don't think that is necessary this year. There are others, Director Houston's indicated, believe it is.
President Alvarez, if I could add, I know we've somewhat passed it, but we were able to get our IT supervisor here to join us. And Isaiah, the question was related to the licenses. I know that you and I have had a chance to meet and discuss that. I know that we've reduced it a little bit, but if you can maybe highlight some of the significant items that are required for us to renew, as well as some of the other issues that we're facing as far as our board service management with our memos.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Director. So the largest increase to our budget is around our software renewals and our maintenance support for our hardware. So last fiscal year, this current fiscal year, excuse me, we implemented a document management system to kind of speed up our AP automation. And we also implemented a budgeting and planning solution. So those are added to the upcoming cost for the next following year. Additionally, about 5 years ago, we modernized our data center here, brought new hardware, new servers from the ground up. And when we bought that equipment, we bought it with 5-year coverage. And we're at that point where all of our equipment's coming up for renewal and the maintenance support, which then rise our cost. And the last item that we've been dealing with in the industry is support costs for maintenance and support. A lot of our initial software was proprietary. You buy the license, you own it. A lot of the modules are now switching over to subscription based, where you have to pay a yearly fee in order to get update security patches. In conjunction with buyouts, there was a large buyout of VMware, which significantly increased our budgeting around our hypervisor, and that's the core of our infrastructure. So those are related to the cost of the reason for our increases.
So that explains going, this year we had a lot of maintenance also in software. Last spent almost 800,000. Supposing we spend 1.2 million. So it costs another $400,000 to maintain those same licenses.
Yes.
Perhaps you can give some examples of the line items.
The line of software is not the cost associated with it,
Okay,
and I don't have the latest revision.
Okay.
The most recent edits.
Okay.
Thank you. And some of that information, maybe you can provide subsequent to the meeting. When you
Yes.
have more you can go ahead and detail it out.
Yes, sir.
thank you, Isaiah. So that brings us to packet page 40. And this is a recurring slide that we've brought forward. Again, looks at the total budget. You can see there that the total revenues are just over 98 million. We've reduced the lateral revenue due to delay on the PB lateral down 270,000. That gets us to a total expense of 72.4 million. And then through our 2 workshops, you can see that the initial workshop, we were able to reduce by 2.5 million. And then at the after the April 27th meeting, we've reduced an additional 302,000. I'm committed to continue to reduce that. And then you can see that option 1 increase of 0%, and option 2, which was the 5%, and option 3 at 10%, and then option 4 the 15%. And I really want to highlight that we're utilizing these options to give you an idea of those numbers. We're not recommending a 15, 10, or 5. The board could choose to go anywhere in between that, depending on your discussions and your deliberations as to where you'd like to go with the rates. But you can see there the debt coverage ratio. Again, we've talked about this, but I just want to highlight it once more. Our contractual obligation on our State Water Resources Control Board, low interest loans require a 1.2 debt coverage ratio. Our strategic business plan targets a 1.75. And so what we've done here is try to highlight what it would look like to get to that 1.5. So you can see the further reductions that would be required down below in order for us to get there. Joseph, oh yes, sir.
When you're done, if you're not done,
Go ahead.
You got it?
With that slide, yes.
So I have a question. On the total expenses, you're showing here 72,094,48. We just went over the projected expenses, which you're proposing for 24, 25, and 69,88. What's the difference?
So if you go, I apologize, and I can see that now. I don't want to add confusion. So if you take that 72.4 and you reduce it by 2.5, which is the red, and then you reduce that further by the 302, that would get you to the 69.
Oh, okay.
We should have added a line there. So I apologize for
What
any
you
confusion.
did is, you had the 72 that you started out with, workshop number 1.
Correct.
And the first set of adjustments and the second set of adjustments. So we really, total expenses, and so that should.
Yes.
just for a little bit slow on this stuff.
No.
So that would have been a subtotal. It'd actually be 98 minus 69.
Correct. We'll fix that and send that back out.
Yeah, because you have space here to do that.
Yeah, we're trying to provide all the information, and when we look at these slides, the director is correct. We could have totaled that up. So if we can turn to packet page 42, we are here. We've gone through a series of workshops focusing in on different aspects each time. This is our capital improvement program budget challenges and opportunities. The challenges should not be a surprise to anybody. The continued poor influent water quality from Hyperion. Aging facilities require more R&R spending. Several major treatment plant assets need to be replaced to maintain service. Unexpected shutdowns due to equipment failure, and position today's recycled water operations to accommodate major possible changes associated with Southern California recycled water programs. So looking at what Pure Water is intended to do and what they're planning to do at Hyperion, we always have our eye on that. That is a challenge. However, I would argue that it's also an opportunity. So you can see that the opportunities, several major recycled water agreements will be renewed in fiscal year 24-25. We've highlighted that throughout this process, that the Torrance refinery agreements will be done again in August. The Chevron nitrified agreement will be done in September. And then the Marathon agreement will be done by January of 2025. The only refinery agreements that won't be possibly won't be fixed in this next fiscal year would be the Chevron boiler feed, below the high pressure. The cost of service study is nearly completed, and I've mentioned to our board president, we plan to bring forward some results to you all at this board meeting this month. The treatment operator contract, the RFP, will be out for bid soon. And West Basin plans to team up with MWD, LADWP, WRD, and I know for people that are joining us virtually, that's Metropolitan Water District, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, the Water Replenishment District, for future projects and explore its role in Metropolitan and LADWP's recycled water programs. And I can't stress that enough. I've been meeting with them regularly in small and large working groups. West Basin is a partner to all of these agencies. And right now we are all working together, very bright future for the region. So if we can turn it to packet page 43. One of the things that I want to say thank you to our staff about is really looking at each of our capital improvement projects with a clear understanding of where our priorities are and what we need to accomplish as a district. We do have contractual obligations to our refineries. Not only is that a water quantity, but also a quality. We do have customer service needs to all of our recycled water customers. And so we highlight those here for you today. Our water supply reliability, first and foremost, all of the recycled water that we produce augments and reduces our demand on imported water. Sound financial and resource management. We're looking at every project from a dollars and cents perspective. Our water quality, we are striving and doing everything we can to meet our clients' demands. That means meeting with our refineries, meeting with the replenishment district to try to solve some of the issues that we face dealing with Hyperion. our permit and contractual water quality requirements with those customers. That's the guiding principle for our short-term investments, really looking at how we meet their needs in this short term, customer service, and our environmental stewardship. All of these things play into our decisions when we come to you with recommendations. It's not an idea of just building a project. It's why are we building this project and what are we going to get out of it? So if I can turn to packet page 44. Again, these are just some of the issues that we look at, the guiding principles for short-term CIP investments, our capital expenditures. This includes our R&R projects and our capital asset refurbishment replacements. Our aging infrastructure is problematic. You're going to hear about specific projects today. We don't just fix things, because we want to. We're fixing them because they need to be fixed. And we hope that the operational expenses and the reduction there will actually benefit us over the long run. So we're looking at what it would cost us to provide potable water supplement. That is a significant cost with our refineries, specifically Marathon. And every time we have an issue there, staff kind of hears me say, are we being forced to supply them with potable water? Because I know that is a significant cost to us. Hopefully a reduction in chemical costs, and then hopefully a reduction in our solids handling costs. And then, of course, with any of these projects, when we delay things, and trust me when I say we're always looking to see what we can delay, and you'll hear about a lot of these items today, is that there's always risk involved. When we defer a project, we are putting ourselves at risk, but what we're trying to do is weigh that risk and find where there's opportunities to delay projects, delay expenses, and hopefully get there so that we can do things in a timely manner. And then that obviously brings us to our targeted R&R projects. So with that, I'm going to hand this over on packet page 46 to Barkha Masarlian to walk us through these next slides. Again, as President Alvarez mentioned, if and when you have questions, please feel free to stop us and we'll answer those the best we can.
Thank you, EJ. Good morning, directors. So packet page 46 is where I'm starting. And we'll start off with a summary of the capital improvement program. And then we'll try to go into an overview of each of the projects that are in there and discuss what is ongoing, what is actually occurred, what are the potential consequences financially or otherwise with a particular project here or there. So if you look at our capital budget program, you can basically look at the top half of it and say, these are capital projects. These are complex type of projects that may require consultants, contractors, studies, designs put together. So they're full capital projects. And then also in our CIP, there's another section that lists expenditures, capital expenditures for essentially the simplest way of looking at it is equipment replacement, or we say capital asset replacement or refurbishment. When you refurbish an asset or you replace an asset, you're basically extending the useful life. It is a capital investment. So a portion of our CIP program has line items in there that talk about those type of assets. So in our CIP program, we have 49 budget line items. 41 of them are capital projects requiring consultants, extensive efforts, if you will. And we'll talk about those. So we'll go through each one of them in different ways. The first way we'll take a look at what are the ongoing projects that we've received board approval to proceed to the next phase, whether it's design or construction, or some of the projects that we just have staff time. We're analyzing it further, bringing, options and recommendations for the board's consideration. And then separate from those ongoing projects and efforts, there's a different category of looking at projects that could be deferred, that are currently in the CIP that you're seeing today, but that could potentially be deferred after considering several factors. It's worth noting that there are projects here that we're going to talk about that only have staff time, but don't. We haven't budgeted consultants' time or contractor time on demo contractor services. We'll also have a list at the end to talk about the projects that are not included in here that we chose as staff not to include in the next fiscal year. We'll go through the reasoning of why we did that. I want to take this opportunity to not focus on the column on the right yet, but to focus on the column on the left. These are the categories that, and that's because we're going to go through each individual project, and you might see that the number will change at the end. But you can see on the left, we've traditionally categorized our projects into three main categories. New infrastructure, right? New treatment facilities, new processes, or new pipelines. That's category number one. Category number two is capital investments going to refurbishment, replacement of assets with the goal of maintaining service. And then category number three, we had the other making those investments at those facilities. And also to know what kind of return is coming from each of the refinery customers in investing, making those capital investments in those satellite plants, for example. So we've broken it down per satellite plant and per the main plant. And then that category you see there, capital asset rehab replacement, those again are the capital expenditures, the equipment replacement, if you will. Under that, you have microfiltration membrane replacement, RO membrane. You have other types of replacements at the plant, like valves and pumps and motors, stuff like that. You have another category for distribution system replacements, like air vacs, for example. And those have, there's a few programs under the capital asset rehab and replacement that we'll go through, and happy to answer any questions. So on the next slide, is there a question?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll focus in first on the ongoing projects and efforts and the other projects for consideration. So it's important to note that before we go into a lot of them has changed. We've looked at, and it has to do with where the district is and where the regional recycle programs are. We've looked at projects in a way where there's opportunity to phase a project or implement it in a programmatic way to minimize upfront investments, but at the same time, minimize risk as we go. We did so. So you'll notice as we go in the next slide, start going through some of the projects that you will notice that I'm going to mention that projects that the board has given us some approval. And the other projects that are in consideration, the board has not given us the okay to proceed with. You see those two categories up there. For projects that the board has approved to the next phase, for example. Those add up to approximately $35 million for the next fiscal year. In that $35 million, there's a couple of $1 million associated with West Basin staff time. So because staff time is accounted for in other budgets, we just want to make that distinction. We look at a project as total cost, but we don't want to double count it with others. So that's why we have two numbers here. You got the 35 million for projects that are ongoing, 33 million without West Basin's labor. And of that 33 million for those projects that are ongoing, 30 million of which would have to come from district funds. There's no external funding for those type of projects. The primary reason, as you'll see when we go through this, is that they're mostly R&R unless an expansion of a distribution system where we've got federal funding or state funding or other mechanisms. Some R&R projects have refinery funding from recent agreements. We're hopeful that we'll have more with new agreements. But that's the first category there. The second category, it's almost the opposite. The projects in consideration there are projects that have external funding, mainly from the refineries, but we don't necessarily have the refineries' approval to proceed with them. So that's where you flip that budget for that one is $6.9 million for the 18 projects there. 6.7 without West Basin's labor. The district funding for those would be around 1.3 million. The remaining of which would come in from external funding. So again, these are projects that we can say, we're not going to proceed until the refinery says, yeah, go ahead, proceed. We're going to pay you back for those. But those projects are on different levels, right? Some are in early planning, some are designs complete, and we can go through those. Before I dive into the individual projects, any questions? Okay. All right, so on packet page 50, we start off the list. This table is going to continue on to the next slide, but we just start off with what we have here. On the left side, in the column, you have the project name. The second column is what we spent up till March on that particular project. The third column is what we project to spend. Not only what we project to spend, but what we spent in the past. So the third column, the estimated total cost of project, past, present, and future. It's important for us to know when we are approving a project, what the total cost is going to be, not just what's moving forward. The fourth column is what the estimated budget is for that particular project in the next fiscal year. And then the last three columns are the estimated funding sources for those particular projects. Later in the presentation, I'm going to turn it back to Wendy to talk about funding a little bit in a broader sense. But this should give you some understanding about where the money is coming from for each of the individual projects. The first one up is the JMM Phase 2 expansion project. Technically speaking, the project should be complete, but we estimate that some of the billing will be laid into the next fiscal year. And that's why we have $650,000 in the next fiscal year. And for that project, as you're well aware, there's state funding, there's refinery funding, there is stakeholder Cal Water funding associated with that project. And so that's pretty much the only new treatment type of new infrastructure. No new pump stations, no new facilities or expansion facilities that are being proposed at any of our sites.
I can interrupt you. Anybody have any questions? I have a question on clarification. So, second column, as you said earlier, that's the amount of money that's been spent in March.
Correct.
Third column is the total cost of the project. So the delta between the two is money that we haven't spent.
Since March, yeah, it's $3 million, roughly speaking.
Okay. And then, in addition to the 3 million, there's another 650,000, or the 650,000 is part of that 3 million?
It's part of it. So the 33 is also future.
So,
So in the next few months, we're gonna spend $2 to $3 million, and 600 is gonna be remaining to the next fiscal year. Yeah. Good question. On the next category are new pipelines, or pipeline type of projects in our distribution system. The Palos Verdes pipeline project is underway. It's in construction. And we estimate that it's a $17 million project. Should come back to that. I think there might be an error there, but we're estimating $2.5 million of which will go into the next fiscal year. So that's underway. It's in construction phase. We're hoping to wrap up the project in November.
okay, but on that one, I could interrupt you again. So just following up on my last question, we're gonna, either there's a lot of work completed that hasn't been paid, or there's gonna be a lot of work done between March 31st and the beginning of the 24-25 budget, which would be the end of June. Just the overall project, I look at the third column, is 17 million. And you spent 5.
Correct.
You spent 12 million, less for less the 2.5,
The pipeline contractor is lagging in their billing. In some of their paperwork, and therefore their billing. They have to submit the paperwork, get their bills approved. They billed us a little over $2 million, where the whole contract is $9 million. So we're hoping in the next couple of months that they catch up on their billing. And
that's a pretty good contract. Billing me all the time, and you say, no, you don't get the bill for that yet.
yeah, there's some scheduling and billing issues that we've discussed a little bit. We'll discuss more in the next annual committee. That they need to catch up on the bills. So we're hoping to spend close to $5-6 million in the next few months on the pipeline side of things. The pump station, which is another $2.5 to $3 million, that has started, but construction activities haven't started yet. City's still holding the permit. We're trying to resolve that. But that's mainly the costs that we think are going to go into the next fiscal year. A little bit of the pipeline, but more so the pump station side. Okay. All right, the two pipeline projects there, Mills Park Recycled Water Lateral and the North Gardena Recycled Water Lateral. Those are projects that were submitted to the Army Corps engineers for funding. And we've also pursued other types of grants for those two projects. The aim of the two projects, each would serve 2 new sites, 2 new parks, 2 new schools. We've discussed this project for quite some time. The reason why we haven't kicked it off, a couple of reasons. One, we're finalizing agreement with Army Corps of Engineers, but 2, mainly, we're trying to get as close as to 100% external funding as possible for this project to proceed. And the only money we have there is some budget for staff time to coordinate, get the agreements in for the Army Corps, and maybe some of the grants. So we haven't budgeted for any consultant time or anything like that for those 2 projects. It's just budget for us to move the ball along and try to achieve that 100% goal of external.
Mark, if I could add, directors, this is one of those areas where we've looked at this project and obviously can defer. We're working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers because it has been pre-funded. As you recall, we did have Congresswoman Maxine Waters work with us and work with her colleagues in order to get the funding there. We've also worked with our internal staff Matt Bay and Tammy Hurley High as far as acquiring additional funding through the State Water Resources Control Board through Integrated Regional Water Management. So we've secured that funding. And now we have prepared kind of a what I would call a roadshow to go meet with the city of Carson, the city of Gardena, and the related school districts to ask for funding. We'll also be working with our retailers to see if they can contribute funding. We're very close to 100%, but we intend to work as far as getting to 100% and then bring that back to you. So just again, looking at every project to see where we can defer and how we can get outside source funding.
Chair, let me ask a question.
Okay.
So just so that I am clear, it's those two projects are in that one category, correct? That was the
Over
fund
South Bay,
Congresswoman Waters got us, which has been what, a couple of years now, I believe. Been almost 2 years.
back in, I think Congress took action in 2020. I think we held an event in 2021.
Yeah, so it's been a while. So I see what you have in your district funding, which is right now is just very small. 50-something thousand dollars, period. Is that if you couldn't get the gap met by other partners?
No, that's just for staff time to.
What's the gap we're looking at trying to get some other partners to fill? Does anybody know?
Rough, it's a little more than 600,000.
Okay. So here, my personal opinion on this though is like, we ought to really make this a priority. Because, we've secured this funding some time ago. Obviously, we continue touting how great that is, but we have not got it accomplished yet. And obviously the Congresswoman and others are going to be asking us about it. As a matter of fact, when we were in DC, she, or not, in this case, it was her staffer, mentioned it to us, to Director Gray and I, that, they really went to bat to get that money for us, quite frankly. So we need to make this a priority, and either we're going to get the additional funding or we're not, but we need to get that moving. So that's just my opinion. Because I also know in the long-term planning of this agency, we may not be doing as many purple pipes, but these are shorter legs. So, I think that we should find every which way to make this happen, in the next, I don't know how quick, fiscal year or what have you.
Director Hughes, I just want to stress, we will definitely bring this back to you with an overview of the funding that we're able to get. Staff has not stopped working with the U.S. Army Corps. That's the first step, is actually entering into the agreement. I think they would admit, and those that have worked with the Army Corps, sometimes things go a little bit slow in working with them. But that's the first step. So we do have time as we work through that with the Army Corps, but we continue to meet with them. And I think it was just in the past couple months that we actually visited them on their site, correct?
Meet with them
Bi-weekly. So we're working with them, but that's just the first aspect of getting the funding secured. But the additional funding, we feel that while we have some time right now, then we'll bring it back to you for your decision.
I also think though that, we shouldn't make it a hindrance that if the cities don't have the funds or as much as we want, that would be a deal breaker. All the cities are strapped, we know that. And I think these are both in one's in Gardena and one's in Carson.
Correct.
I believe. So, they're not in my division, but I think they're real important to this whole agency. So, we can ask from those other organizations, but I just know that times are tough. But we need to make a decision as soon as we can that these move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Director Gray, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Director Houston, for bringing that up because that is in interest of the Congresswoman. I want to just acknowledge I do have to leave, but thank you for the presentations that I've heard this morning. And so I just want to let Chair, that I do have to leave the meeting, but thank you.
Thank you, Director Gray.
Okay, the next project up there is the South Bay I-405 auxiliary lanes. That is, we have a recycled water pipeline that's crossing the 405, and because the 405 expansion, we need to relocate our recycled water line. and it has to be done on our expense. Good news, we recently got the good news that the Caltrans accepted our redesign, so we'll be able to move forward with the minimal cost option for this one. Yeah.
I thought we were gonna end up just hardening the line. Are we actually relocating it?
We are putting a couple of 45s.
We are,
We're gonna discard a portion of it and then do a reroute. We'll have next week's meeting. We'll talk about. Okay, so there are other, you'll see in the list later on, there are other types of projects like new developer type projects that, you know, they would come in and make a connection, but haven't included those in this list because they're not yet approved. For those type of projects, we'll come into the board, say, here's an agreement with the developer, they're gonna pay for a new connection. We can talk about that a little bit more. But those are the pipeline type of projects. Moving on to R&R. There are 2 or 3 projects that I'm gonna talk at the end of the presentation a little bit more because they're high dollar items. And one of them is the solids handling improvement project. We presented over the years on this multiple different alternatives we've looked at to see what is really the most cost-effective solution for the aged infrastructure that we have out there. We performed several different life cycle analysis, looking at different technologies. We looked at routing the waste into the county sewer. We looked at routing the waste into the city of LA sewer. We estimated the cost for each of those alternatives and came back with a recommendation to the Unit Committee that said, you know, if we just replace it in kind, it's going to be the most cost-effective alternative out of all of them. We estimated at the time that the return on investment is going to be around close to 5 years. More recent estimates showing it around 4. And at the time, the Unit Committee and the board allowed us to proceed to the design phase of it. And with the condition of bringing back new information as they become available. And we have done that. So this is a $20 million item project, 14 of which would be the next fiscal year. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The second one is a tile 22 filter R&R. We'll talk about that one too. This one again was a project where we provided alternatives for the board, 3 different alternatives. The Unit Committee suggested a hybrid alternative, a phased approach. Let's do 3 basins first, see where we go, and then look into the other ones. The DCS backbone replacement, another major project, another programmatic approach. We, after looking at this, conducted an audit, looking at all the equipment that is basically not available, and considering how it's impacting us today with projects that are ongoing. We came up with 2 phases of the project. Let's start with improving the backbone of the DCS system. And that again is a large item. It's close to phase 1 of it is $12 million with $6.3 million coming in next year. So that is a project that right now we're out to bid for the owner's advisor services. So we're coming back for Unit Committee and the board to talk about more about that soon. The Barrier Basin and Pump Station Rehab Project, we did a condition assessment several years back. We decided not to make major investments and again, look at it in the phase approach. The first phase of this would be to replace a few electrical equipment that are basically past their useful life. What we did here is, again, not put any consulting dollars yet because we want to bring that to the board and talk about it before we spend a lot of money and get the board's approval. So the 27,000 there and the 30,000 for the next project, or 27,000 there is mostly related to staff time. The one at the end of it there is the VFD rehab project. The first phase of that is in construction right now, construction phase. So there's minimal amount of money associated with that. We would come back for the next phase, talk about it with the committee and the board and see how it goes from there. If you don't have any more questions, I'd like to kind of continue this table on the next page. The bulk chemical storage improvements, you'll see bulk chemical storage projects for each of the satellite plans. It's a little, you may remember that we replaced a few tanks in the last few years. As part of technical planning, we're going to do a condition assessment to try to phase it out as well. This one also has some minimal amount of staff time money right now to do assessments. The fire protection system improvement, we've reported, about the fire protection system that we have at the Edwards Little, the proprietary nature of it, some of the challenges that we are facing with the vendor in addressing the issues that the fire department has tagged. And so we've discussed the possibility of going out to bid with a project that would basically replace the proprietary system with a more neutral system and allow us to do appropriate maintenances and have appropriate responses to every time the fire department comes out there for something. So what we're doing on that, the status on that one is that we're going to come to the E&O committee with a set of plans for the replacement and an updated cost estimate, and see if the committee is okay with it. We would proceed with the replacement project. CNTP bulk chemical and then the JMM bulk chemical, those are two tanks that have failed. We have temporary tanks out there, chemical tanks, and we are, one of them is 100% design complete. We're looking at the 100% right now. The other one is 75%, almost 100% complete. So we'll be bringing those back to the committee and the board to ask for to procure the tanks. So we won't proceed with those major expenditures until we do that. The JM site improvement, there is, this has come up on a couple of occasions. We thought about improving some of the landscaping at the JMM site and some of the storm drain issues around the site. And we debated whether to include that in phase 2 expansion or separate it. We decided to separate it. We could put it here in the next fiscal year, or we could, that's the thought based on the discussion we've had, is to put it in the next fiscal year and bid it out. But potentially that could be, that recommendation is based on the discussion we've had with the board in the last couple of budget meetings. So under the capital asset R&R and under other capital asset R&R, as I mentioned, as membrane replacement and other types of asset replacements, it is a significant amount, $5.3 million projected in the next fiscal year. And then other projects, as I mentioned earlier, that includes IT-related projects and DLD-related projects. So first on the DLD-related projects, there's two on there. One is related to the elevator. The other is related to the fluorescent lights. There's new legislation that says that we have to remove all the fluorescent lighting from the building by the end of the year. So there's a $50,000 item in there to do that. The DLD building, elevators, the latest assessments that have come in from our maintenance staff is that it's past due, and the parts are available and they're not meeting the regulated building regulations. So we've included north of $300,000 for modernizing the elevators in this building. There are 6 other types of DLD projects that we did not include. HVAC related, plumbing related, major plumbing, HVAC, and a few other ones that we did not include in there. We could bring those back and have a discussion with the board. But our thought is that when it comes to DLD and based on past discussions that we've had over the last years, we should prioritize our investments in the building in a smart way. IT related projects, mainly related to some hardware and data center UPS replacement, network switch replacement, hardware replacements, and then some items related to conference room. So some budget has been put in there under other projects, and that makes up the $970,000 that you see there. So altogether here, what you see is ongoing efforts, just these projects, $35.3 million. Without West Basin Time, $33 million, 28 of which would be district. I'll proceed to the next slide. Other projects for consideration. In terms of new infrastructure, there's a couple of development-related projects, as I mentioned earlier, for which we could get into an agreement with the developer, and they would fund the new connection to recycled water, the Torrance Gateway Phase 3, and then the Carson Street recycled water connection. Other R&R projects, the first 5 you see there, one's related to our RO systems, and one's related to the Hyperion pump station and the force main. These are efforts that have some refinery funding associated with it, meaning if we don't do these efforts with the reconciliations, refinery funding may have to be handed back. These are projects where we are still evaluating whether it's worth spending major dollars or not. Whether are we going to end up replacing something that could be a stranded asset or no? And so what we want to do with these is we want to come back to the board and have an honest discussion about what it means. Are there any other phased opportunities for the Hyperion pump station instead of rehabbing all pumps? And one first do particular things on the force main. Should we take advantage of the potential shutdown that's going to happen as part of the DCS? DCS system will require complete shutdown of our system at one point. Should we take the opportunity to go into our force main and do a full assessment to see its condition? We want to talk about it, come back to the committee, tell you our thoughts, and to the board, see if you agree with us proceeding with those. So we have some money associated with those in there for staff time to come back and discuss those. The 3 projects at the bottom over there, Tile 22 isolation valve replacement. Back in 2014, we noticed that one of the large valves on our north leg of the system. So when our water, recycled water comes out into the distribution system, it goes into the south leg or the north leg. South leg feeds 2 satellite plants, north leg feeds 1. This particular valve is inoperable, and it has been inoperable for quite some time. And so if a leak were to happen on the north end, the entire system would have to shut down. And so this is where we can look at risks, we can look at potential consequences. And back a few years back, we did some analysis to look into, instead of replacing that valve in the street, why don't we build another vault at the plant, not in the street, to be able to isolate both systems. And so this would be a project to go back and look at that in an effort to potentially mitigate a major interruption to multiple refineries. So we'd like to come back and show the, committee and board, what we're offering on that one. The Title 22 ozone system improvement, the ozone system that we built as part of, I think it was phase 5. We're not utilizing that system as originally intended. One of the thoughts, one of the evaluations that we've conducted over the last 2 years was the potential of using the ozone for the Title 22 system. Right now, it's being used for the MFRO. So we have money in there to potentially pilot an option to see if we can use a system that's already there, built, to improve the water quality going out into the system. The Chevron nitrogen product water tank rehab, that design has been complete. We're not proceeding into construction as directed until we get refinery funding. So we're hoping that Chevron, some sort of funding mechanism will come in place in the next fiscal year to push the rehab work on this product water tank through into construction. On the next page. On the next page, you see a slew of projects that are at the Torrance satellite plant. We've coordinated these projects with Torrance Refinery for several years, and there's been requests to ask for funding from them to proceed with these projects for a while. The last amendment to the agreement actually allows us to proceed with these projects and with their funding, with the formal approval that they would give us. To date, they haven't given us the formal approval to proceed. So these are budgets. If we were to proceed with the project, they would give us the approval, we would proceed with them. But to date, we haven't received any approval to proceed with this. There are contractual negotiations ongoing to reconcile costs, and based on that, the refinery may decide to do 1 or 2 or 3 of these moving forward. Last year, we decided to take these out of the budget and bring them back in when the approval comes in. We can do that, or we can keep them in here as well. All right, on the next slide, we're going to talk about, it's good to point out that out of the projects that I talked about, there are several projects, you heard me say that staff time, only staff time. On the next slide, on packet page 55, you'll see some of the ones that are only staff time. The first 5 are only staff time, and then that have some refinery funding related. And then the second one is again, list of Torrance plant projects that we would only proceed if the refinery give us the okay. So these combined are close to $4.7 million. So initially we looked at proposed for next year around 42. If we were to take these out, you're down to closer to 37. We're to choose to keep these out of the budget for now. On the next couple of slides, I wanted to focus on some of the projects that we excluded from today's consideration, but felt it prudent to come in and say why we excluded these. So on the next slide, you'll see on the top part, mostly developer type projects that at some point project was hot, but then it was cold, and then it was hot again. And so we decided, we were just going to keep this off until there's a serious agreement put in place for us to do a connection. There's also the recycled water fill station in there that's still tied up with the anti-DEG back and forth discussions that we're having with the regional board. On the R&R projects, we talked about the DCS system. I'm going to talk about a little bit more. But there is a phase two for the DCS. We talked about doing the $10 million portion of it first to be, have a phased approach. The phase two could be another $20 million for the years after. So we decided to kind of park that. The phase two, phase three MF replacement project. There's $10 million out of refinery funding allocated for that project. But it's a project that could lead to a stranded asset if better quality of water comes in. And so there's this balance that we're trying to achieve in our discussions with Chevron on whether or not we should proceed with the project. The other factor there is that we don't think it's going to cost $10 million anymore. We think it's going to be much more than double that. So we chose to leave it out until we have our negotiations with the refinery progress. The Tile 22 column filter systems, those are miscellaneous pieces of equipment that we were thinking of that are located near our filter basins that we were thinking of kind of refurbishing all of them at once. We've since decided to let's tackle them as we go. Again, more programmatic, more phased type of approach to those systems, and chose to defer this project until we have a better assessment and more detailed recommendations coming to the committee and board. Okay, so that brings me back to that initial slide. We talked about all the projects at this point. Combined, they come up to $42.3 million just for the next year. If we were to again move some of those 18 projects that are under, or 13 projects that are under consideration, you can shave off another $4.7 million to bring it down to 37. This is what this is the total for the projects that we discussed today. So on the next few slides, as I mentioned earlier, it's not only important to see what these projects expenditure is for next fiscal year, but how much more are we going to spend in the next 5 years related to these projects. So if we go to packet page 60, we're going to look at the 5-year projections in different ways. The first one is we're breaking it down per those major categories: new infrastructure, the other category, which was IT and DOT, and then also R&R. And you can see from the graphic that overwhelming majority of our expected capital expenditures are R&R. And they're geared towards maintaining level of service or maintaining service, maintaining quantity and quality to our customers. On the next slide, you'll see the 5-year broken down into the different locations. Edward C. Little versus the distribution system versus the satellite plants. This is important because if we are trying to get refinery funding for improvements at a particular satellite plant, then we need to understand how much we're spending in that facility. Also important if we're considering transferring assets at some point. On the next combined, what you see here, you're seeing the 42.3 in the first year, the 40 million in there. Combined, all 5 years for all these different projects is around $175 million. So on this next slide here, packet page 62, this helps us understand where the bulk of the money is going. So you can see on the gray area there, on fiscal year 24-25, $14.5 million related to the solids handling project. You can see $6.4 million related to DCS system, and you can see $2.6 million for the PV project, and $1.6 million related to the filter basins. On the next slide, also looking at the 5 years, the $175 million over 5 years, you can see our projections that in the next 5 years, aside, after phase 2 expansion project in Carson is done, we're not projecting any new expansion facilities or treatment facilities. We're not including in our projections major pipeline projects. The bulk of it is R&R, and even in our DLD and IT expenditures for this next 5 years, we're now just considering this next year until we understand what we're going to do with the facility moving forward. So we'll round it out with talking about the major expenditures. Before I hand it off to Wendy, next slide, you can see a summary of the solids handling improvement project. Again, $21 million total, 14 in the next fiscal year, 14 and a half in fiscal year. But on the next slide, on packet page 65, you can see how we staff view this project as a cost-saving project in about 4 years. It was 5, but based on the latest design assumptions that we've made, they've gone down to around 4. We'll be talking more about that with the E&O committee in the next committee meeting. On the next project on packet page 66, we've discussed the operational issues, the maintenance issues, the cybersecurity risk associated with our DCS system, the inability for us to find the parts during emergency conditions, the trouble we're finding with technicians that are knowledgeable of this old system that we have. And so we've talked, you see the next slide is probably familiar to the E&O committee members. We've presented this on several occasions where the results of the audit that we conducted that showed 67% of all the hardware is obsolete. 12 approaching. Yeah. And so this is a major expenditure, and we're hoping that the phase program that we're putting together is more manageable in terms of capital investment. And then lastly, on the next slide on packet page 68 is alternative filter rehab projects. We have 14 filter basins. After discussing at length with the committee, we chose to do 3 first. And again, implementing a programmatic approach. On the next slide, you'll see that a familiar slide that we used in the past about all the failures that we had with the filter basins and the cost impact that it had on operations moving forward. So we're hoping to continue that concludes my section of the presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions, or otherwise I will hand it over to Wendy to talk about funding options. Any questions?
Okay, so let's move to page 70. So we're going to talking about the funding option for the FY25 next year, and also the funding option for the next 4 years. On page 71, slide number 71. So this is just a demonstration about just how much saving we are going to have for next fiscal year FY25, based on the reliability service charge options the board will approve. Like you can see, our total revenue will be increased from 97 million to the 101 million, depending on board option of increase in RSC. And then our total expenses, I put in the 72 million. This is the very first proposal that we had presented to you. Well, today's total expenses down to 69 million, and then we'll be continuing working on reducing our total expense. And then the next line is our total debt payment. the debt payment wouldn't change, we already calculated it's going to be about $22.7 million. So that's going to leave us for the next year, our total net revenue from by selling the potable water and the recycling water, the net cash we may have is between $2.7 million to $6.5 million, plus the $2.8 million we just saved. So those numbers I need to
I have
change.
a question.
Yes,
Back to your slide number 4. Where I questioned the subtotal. The total expenses are not 72.4, right?
yeah, it's a
It's going to
69,
be 69.6.
yes, yeah,
69.6 from the 97. And the 22 would not be 2.7, but more like 5.
yeah, it's more like 5, yes, I need to revise on that.
We go up
Yes,
by about
$2.8 million. Yeah, $2.8 to $3 million, yes.
So we start out with option 1, and we would have for CIP about $6 million.
Correct. Yeah, I apologize. I need updating this slide.
And same, well, that's why I had asked that question at the beginning. It does get a little confusing. And then it doesn't transfer to the end.
Correct,
So for option 2, the net revenue for CIP is gonna be closer to 7.
Yeah.
And for option 3, it's gonna be closer to 8.5.
correct,
And for option 4, it's gonna be closer to 9.5 or 10.
correct. So next slide is slide number 72. So this is slide that just giving the board general information about if West Basin's what is the West Basin's rate increase going to be have an impact in general the with metropolitan's increase. So if the board choose option 1, which is no increase at all, our potable water rate is still going to be increased by 16.7%, but that is just due to 100% of metropolitan's. Next slide, 70.
Real quick, I want to make sure that everybody.
Go ahead.
No, I don't want to gloss over that. The Metropolitan Water District rate increase that was approved just, I think it was last month, was significant. And if you look at option 1, if you look down there, it's a 16.7% rate increase on West Basin Municipal Water. That includes obviously the increase in their tier 1, but also the increase in their RTS. And these are pass-through rates from Metropolitan Water District. I've mentioned this before because I think it's important for transparency when I work with our retailers to really highlight these issues. The RTS charge for 23 of the 26 member agencies is assessed on the individual property taxes. For all of those member agencies, there's only 3 that do not do that. All 3 of us, I believe, assess that in a different manner. West Basin historically has always included the RTS on our commodity volumetric rate for imported water, as you see here. So when you look at the rate increases that are included in the boxes, those would be the West Basin rate increases, but it would be along with the Metropolitan Water District rates. And I've had this discussion with all of our retailers to highlight that issue. I don't want them to think that we're just talking about a 5%. It's a 5% or 10% or 15% in addition to the Met rate increase. So I just wanted to stop it and make that point.
So it's a very good point. And I don't know if the rest of the board had any comments, but if you look at it, this is really what we're facing. If we have a zero rating, we will be, our customers, all of us, as ratepayers who being served by West Basin, as of January 1, 2025, will see a 16.7% in just the cost of tier 1 water, purchase water. That's without West Basin doing any increases this year at all. We do a 5% increase, then we look at that second, column or third column, and there would be a 21.7% increase, et cetera. If we look at 5, 10, and 15% is shown there. So without any increases in our rates, just because of other actions taken by Metropolitan, our increase is going to be 16.7%. And EJ raised a good point about the RCS charge that is a West Basin charge, I'm sorry, a Metropolitan charge. West Basin, along with other agencies, chose to not have that put on the property tax basis. Metropolitan every year does assess property taxes to recover RCS up to an amount that was in effect, I think up to about 15 or 20 years ago. As they've increased it above that, they cannot increase the property tax. And the delta is made up by the agent. In our case, it goes at the very beginning, way back to the purple screen, do not have that collected by Met. The property tax. So we have to pass that through every year. But without doing it, without increasing our rates at all, 0% increase on West Basin's rate, the rate that we will be charging for water as of January 1, 25, be 16.7% higher than it was than the other ones. So our rates will go up 16.7% without us increasing our readiness to serve charge. The other issue, when you look at the cost of water, I mean, I'm kind of shocked these days because it wasn't that long ago, 10 years ago, that we never thought water was going to be anywhere near this stuff, at least not this decade. And these were numbers that 20 years ago, people were talking about desal and so on. So we're looking at $1,800 payment. I don't know if anybody else has any comments?
No. Excuse me. I do. Mr. Chair. Maybe a comment, a couple comments and a question. I just want to make sure I understand the breakout of that 16.7%. So
Actually having,
yeah, because I understand with the 2-year cycle, it was what, 8 point something and 8 point something, right?
correct,
Yeah,
on the tier 1.
tier 1. But can you all just edify me, educate me on where the 16.7 in 1 year?
So you can see that the RTS,
Uh-huh.
and it's a pass-through. Again, they recalculate that at the January 1. And that's at 149 now. And that goes to 191 in the new year. And so you couple that, and I think in the 16%, is that including the capacity charge?
Yeah, that's also including the capacity charge. We're currently paying 2 million, and next year we're going to pay like 2.8 million.
But that,
Just to your point, Director Houston, it was 8.5, but if you looked at what that was across the board with all of the charges. The tier 1 rate, hit water, which is what we're looking at, was actually 11%.
Okay.
That Metropolitan adopted. So just on tier 1, and then as the staff has mentioned, the readiness to serve charge also increased And that did go from 149 to 191. So it are changed and all gets transferred. Into the
And
Question on that though, before you even go further. So does this happen just for the 1 year or does it go higher for the second year?
they adopted a 2-year budget.
This will stay. This number will stay solid for 2 years.
No,
Oh, that's what I wanted. Okay, go ahead.
the following January 1,
Go up again.
there'll be another rate increase. And I did want to point out, so I apologize for our board as well as those that are viewing this online. Water rates are extremely complex. And there's an error in this document. The total rate increase that you see, I believe, includes the capacity charge, which is not our volumetric charge. And so the volumetric charge we just checked, if you look at what you're paying for tier 1 rate from West Basin is currently $16.80, which includes our $275 reliability service charge. It's actually a 10.8% rate increase on the volumetric, but they are still paying the capacity charge. That's just a fixed charge that's assessed monthly. And we'll have numbers for you in just a moment. And again, the 16.7 is correct in its totality. But the complexity of the rates, when you talk about what we charge per acre foot, it would be a 10.8%. And again, we'll have that for you shortly. I want to make sure that I'm correct on it.
Yeah. I mean, if we're just comparing with, volumetric, we should not be including the
Capacity charge.
capacity charge.
Okay, let me ask a question or two more, and that's it, I think. So one is, and I know you've already said it, EJ, you've had some conversations with some of our retailers.
Yes.
I'm sure they're well aware of what Metropolitan has done, which will be passed straight through this agency. We have no choice, period,
Correct.
like we just talked about. Even if we increase nothing further on our end. Have you heard, what have been their comments? Have they given pushback? Have they just accepted it? I mean, what has been the feedback of our retailers?
So there's one that I have not yet met with, but I would point out that all of them expect a rate increase from West Basin Municipal Water District. They understand that the expenses of managing programs and delivering water are going up. They do all know about the Metropolitan Water District rate increases. And I've talked to them and highlighted exactly what that includes, which is when you just talked about the capacity charge that they'll continue to pay that. But also we've had great deal of conversations on the RTS and how that compares with other agencies. And then of course their tier 1 rate as well. I've heard, again, I believe all have stated to me that they expect to see a rate increase from West Basin. One said that they would hope that it would be in between the 5 and the 10%, not the 15. And that would be, I think, the most direct statement that I have received. A lot of our retail agencies, and of course, the investor-owned utilities go through the Public Utility Commission to set their rates. But our municipals are all going through the process now of doing rate studies themselves so that they can bring rate cases to their city councils. And so, of course, they're watching and waiting to see what happens here because they're going to pass that through as well.
Okay, so but in some ways you made it a little more confusing because I get where, so they have said they would, step back. They expect a rate increase is going to come. Well, that happened. Met passed it. So it's out of our hands already. That's one. So that's coming down the pike no matter what. They're going to get a rate increase. But when you said that they were expecting between maybe, what did you say, a 5 to 10 or whatever?
One of our retail agencies, one of our investor owners did say, well, we understand you're going to need a rate increase for West Basin. We would hope it wouldn't be the 15. It would be in between the 5 and the 10.
Okay. So, but what is that referring to? What's in these little red boxes? Or we're already getting a 16-point-something% coming through?
Yes. And I want to, the rate increase, remember at the bottom, I want to make it very clear. That's not correct on volumetric. We held a workshop for our retailers with this box showcasing not just the rate increases from Metropolitan Water District, but also what we were looking at, what a 5%, 10%, and 15% would be. We did have all of our retail agencies in attendance for that meeting. But I'm doing everything I can to be as transparent as I can to walk them through what each of these categories is. And in that presentation, which I believe you were provided, I know our board president was there, we explained what each one was.
Okay, so one last thing. I mean, number one, we all just saw it. It's very, very complicated. All these numbers, they're all over the place. What means what and where? And understanding the retailers, of course, get this. I guess my last thing is, I understand where we could say, well, you know what, we should not add anything else onto this because it's already going to be coming down the pipe from Metropolitan. But obviously, if we don't add additional funding to our own revenue sources, we're going to be hurting worse, right?
Correct.
So it seems like we have to look at some options where we're going to do some sort of an increase. I don't know how we completely just hold the line and say, well, Metropolitan passed it, and we're not going to add nothing to it to fund our own programs. So it's just my thinking at this moment.
Well, I want to thank you for your comments, and I want to, we're going to send this slide out as soon as this meeting is complete. We'll send it here, and we'll try to get it posted and out to everybody. I want to, in that first column, without a rate increase by West Basin Municipal Water District, just with what Met has done, it would be a 10.8% increase on the volumetric charge per acre foot. The dollar amounts are correct. So you see the 1861, but that would be a 10.8%. If you look at option 2, that would be an 11.6% rate increase. So if you were to add West Basin, if on our reliability service charge, the only thing that we can adjust here, if you did a 5% on the reliability service charge, that would amount to an 11.6% rate increase. If you were to adjust that reliability service charge to 10%, which would take that from 275 to the 303, that would amount to a 12.4% rate increase. And then if you were to take option 4, which again would take the reliability service charge from 275 to 316, that would amount to a 13.2%. So at the low end, it's a total of just handling Met's rate increase option. That's a 10.8. And the highest end, the option 4 option would be a 13.2%. So I apologize for the error on the slide. I think we're trying to be as transparent as possible. And I think what we did is we added the capacity charge, which is not on the volumetric rate. We charge that as a fixed rate year in and year out. So our retailers have experienced that, but this would be on the volumetric rate. And if we could have staff begin the process of correcting that so we can get that out and posted in the chat online right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now, to your point, Director Houston, I think that what you've seen in a previous slide is really with the potential rate increase that you'll be considering, it's kind of what is left over. So you have our expenses, you have our debt coverage, and then what would be that amount of funding that would be dedicated to the CIP that we presented today. Again, we would argue that the CIP that we're identifying for you is essential, it's crucial. Everything that we can, we're going to defer so that our partners can help us pay for, especially when it comes to our satellite facilities and our unique contractual requirements and relationships. But that remaining funding is what would be dedicated to CIP. And I think that the remainder of what we have to show you is kind of what are those options using that remaining funding. What would be the option as to how we can move forward with those projects primarily the solids handling and the DCS. So if we could have Wendy continue, let's get that, Wendy, I don't know if you can have your staff correct that and get it to us
Okay.
while we're here, because I'd like to get that posted for those attending.
Yeah, slide
virtually.
72.
Correct.
Okay, we're correcting on that. So then we're moving on to,
Excuse me. So
Yeah.
we correct slide 72.
Yeah.
You need to correct slide 73 also.
yes, I'll do that too. Yes. Oh, actually, even the 71, because we're going to use the $69.8 million IT expenses. Yeah. So moving on to slide,
So another thing, go on, so just kind of finishing that discussion, Director Houston pointed out some things. I don't know if Director Deere or Director Williams, you guys have any comments?
No. But my only comment would be that we need to do something,
Yes.
because if we don't, it's gonna be a missed opportunity, because I think the mindset of folks today is that there's something coming. If you don't do it, and it's like, you gotta do it. Because now with all of these organizations that haven't done anything in many, many years, and now they have to do something, everybody's in a bit of rage right now. But they'll accept it.
Going back to kind of the driver behind the rate increase, it's gonna go through regardless of what we do. Metropolitan. This is this year. Metropolitan adopted a 2-year budget. The 2-year budget did increase the rate. The rate will go up again following year. But when we look at the rates again next year, we will be facing a similar situation. So by that time, the water will be able to do nothing. Again, have another big bump. So to your point, Director Williams, it's not very pleasant to have to deal with all of the costs today. The public out there is aware of just every time people turn around, whether it's gonna be water, the
Sewer.
electric bill is gonna go way up because of the actions that the PUC just took. In terms of automatic service charge, other expenses, insurance, we're just looking at a lot of increases as just citizens of this region that we're facing. It's a tough time out there. So when we're looking at this, I think that the general manager indicated that one of the agencies, most of the agencies, I did attend the workshop, were the agencies, but a customer workshop. There wasn't any comments in the customer workshop, but one of the our customers said, well, they prefer to see something in that 5 to 10%. Obviously, the lower we can keep it, the better, but something's gonna have to happen. And then the other things is the implications of how are we gonna deal with long-term operation of the agency because of commitments, right or wrong, and expenditures, right or wrong, that will incur impact.
Okay, we're going to go to page 73. So the page 73, as you can see, on the top, this is the demonstration of how are we going to be in next year? How are we going to funding our $28 million district required funding CIP project? So on the top is basically the net revenue for CIP. Like Director Alvarez pointed out, we're going to add additional 3 million to each line because I need updating the, we reduced the expenses right here. But then after that, we are planning to get a 1% loan from the state of California next year. including that is 12 million, loan from Carson Phase 2 reimbursement. And then the 3 million is from our PD lateral. So that's going to be the state of California going to be loan us 1%. And then we're going to be receiving 15.9 million in total. So then that's going to be the rest of them how to fund the $28 million construction project, which is West Basin can either use our cash or we still have a 30 million line credit available to us if the board decided to taking the money from the line credit. So that's a line demonstrating either we're going to use our cash or we're going to use the 30 million line of credit.
Okay, so, does anybody have any questions on that one? So, if I understood you correctly, I have a question of clarification. We are going to be taking the loan from the state.
Yes,
And that loan will be in the amount of 15 million.
15.9, two different loans total.
So in addition to our current indebtedness of approximately 200 million, we will be adding this year an additional 15 million. So we're gonna bump that up to 215 million.
Yes, we already applied for that. And I believe this is a,
So that's,
Can you identify which loans those are that we've already applied for?
the one is a $12 million is the state revolving loan for the reimbursement of Carson Phase 2. We had already receiving 3.6. And then the total for that is 15 million. So we're going to be continue receiving another 12 million. And then the other one is the PV lateral, which is the 3 million that we're going to be receiving next year. That's also from the state of California.
So this would not include new loans. These are our existing loans that have been applied for. We would just be receiving those funds.
but on our first workshop, we talked about we talked about our indebtedness, our long-term cash flow issues. So our indebtedness, we talked about at that first workshop, I believe we were around 200 million in the current indebtedness. So
Correct.
on top of that, we're going to be adding another 16 million.
16 million.
16 million. So do nothing today. We're already committed to increasing our debt from 200 to 216 million.
That is correct.
Yeah. So
And that's when we're gonna have 7 years, we're gonna lose another $7 million of revenue.
You're referring to the standby charge.
well, if we do not do the thing
So
is,
the other question, we may not have the answer, but our debt payment then currently is 22.7 million, will go up just on the basis of what we be, even though we pay it at 1%, I understand it's very cheap money, your debt payment still has to pay that back. Even if it's 0%, you still have a debt payment. It's gonna go up.
correct. The debt payment, the 22.6 million is already including the 12 million. We're going to be the 15 million we're going to receiving from the state of California. That one is 40 years. Each year we just need to pay back about $1 million.
Still a payment.
Correct.
So you're saying that just so that I understand, the 22.7 million includes. I thought this is new debt that we're adding, and that the current debt payment is 22.7.
So the current debt is 20.7. And then we're including the about $500,000 for the additional 12 million we're going to borrow from the Carson Phase 2 that we're going to be receiving. And then we're also including $166,000 that we already received the last year from state of California. That's 3.6 million.
I know you don't have it now, but I would appreciate if you give us a breakdown. There's a current debt.
Yes.
There's a current debt payment. There's our new debt, we're already committed, which is the revolving loan fund. There's a revised debt payment. That's just there. And talking about still having to come up with additional cash beyond that.
Correct.
If we undertake additional the capital projects that we're talking about today.
Yes. So the reality is our current, net revenue from next year, we're only going to have like about $5 or $6 million actual money. But if we are going to do $28 million construction, then there's a gap of 20 million, 21, 22 million. So we could use West Basin cash, but then we don't really have that much cash either, so.
Exactly, we don't have any cash. Not that we don't have that much cash, we don't have any cash.
Okay, so what's the point?
The point is that, at least I'm asking the questions, I would like the information, exactly what are commitments that we would be making if we're going to be incurring additional debt. I'd like to then come back, and I don't think it's in here, and I think we do need to have a discussion. What happens, right now we have about 60 million in reserves. I understand that having more money in reserve is always good. And no one's gonna tell you that you should have less, and we always tell you you should have more. But that what we may want to do is then take that money out of reserves, given that we are already over leveraged in terms of indebtedness, and we already have and our ability to pay that. Because that's gonna take a bigger and bigger chunk of our rates. We're charging, we gotta generate a lot of money to pay for past debt. Good, bad, or indifferent, that we're not recovering from any other expense. In a few years, 6 years, 7 years, whenever the standby charge drops off, we have another 7 million. And that should come out of our operating cash. It's not coming out of the annual RGS or standby charge collection. It's so that everybody's aware of what we are, a very precarious financial position. And if we had to generate just another $7 million to cover the loss of the standby charge, how much do we have to increase our rate by?
We'll look into that.
And along those lines, I would like to know, and it's an easy answer to this one. How much are we spending in our giveaways? Our community, and all of our community stuff. How much are we spending?
In the grand scheme of it, it's nominal.
Nominal, but how much is it?
The straws and stuff, but I can get you that number. I don't want to say that it's not much, but when we start looking at potential cuts, and this is something that I can discuss with each of you, if you'd like, we can discuss it here, is that I anticipate us making further cuts from the proposed budget, getting below what you see there in the earlier slides of the 69. But further cuts require what I would call programmatic cuts. So you're talking about removing or getting rid of something or initiating something at the start of the fiscal year and ending it when they're gone. So right now we have what we would call a number of, our straws, our branded straws for different events, some additional branded items. I'm sure you've seen our tumbler that we have, kind of some of that. We don't give those out very often because that's kind of a higher end item, but we have pens, erasers and stuff like that, pencils. So we're not talking about a lot as far as what we give away there. We also give away aerators and spray nozzles. So we
I'm
can,
talking about let me back up then. The program. What if we got what would it, how much is the program costing us?
as far as the giveaways,
Well, the things that we do, we give, I guess you could just say the giveaways.
tchotchke,
No, that, but all the stuff that we have, that we do for community outreach. Yeah, sponsorships, all of that stuff.
we can pull that for you. They were in the previous budget workshop identifying each of the different categories. I don't know,
Yeah.
Wendy, if you have that handy.
So, today is, I think we're now facing some real question. We're gonna need to have at least the next budget workshop. And I think we all should make a list of the types of things we want to see come back so that we can make a decision. I for one want to start off with what I already asked about is how much are we gonna be adding in terms of our debt payments? And a real breakdown in that. What happens if we shift and lower our, take some more additional money in our reserves? And for further increase now, our rates to generate more revenue in order to borrow less. Given that we're gonna be losing a big chunk of revenue that we use to offset debt right now. In general, just for the rule of thumb, for every dollar that we raise our rates, we generate $80,000. So to make up 7 million, you can raise your rates about $90.
$87 acre fee, if you count that 80,
Yeah, 87.
about that 90.
I rounded it up. That's when we would have to raise our rates. One, just to cover the loss of the standby charge.
Mr. Chairman, can you hold that right there? I'm informed that if I leave, which I have to do, the action items can't be moved on. So would you mind diverting from our agenda again and going back to the action items, which shouldn't take very long? And then
Okay, then we come back to this.
Yeah.
Fine.
we'll go back to that. The action items are items, 5, A, 1, 2, and 3, and I'll move approval of all 3 items.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve all 3 items, and a second to approve all 3 items. I would like to just go through the items. Item 1 is a, $1,000 expenditure for Health Starry Night and the Harbor Lights Gala benefit. Item 2 is a $1,500 expenditure for Champions for Progress Space Fit Water. And item 3 is a $500 expenditure for the Carson celebration. So, that motion basically is talking about some of the programs you might want to cut.
Right.
About, $3,000 in additional expenditure. Okay, we have a motion and a second, so we'll take a roll call.
Director Scott Houston.
Yes.
Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray, Director Harold Williams.
Yes.
President Desi Alvarez.
On item 6.
Item B is, district sponsorship. And you want to report it now? That the general manager make a report?
Well, it's my understanding, Mr. Chairman, that we did this last year, so I'll base on that information.
That is incorrect.
What's
That's not
incorrect?
correct.
That is incorrect.
About this, I'll move the item
Second.
There we go. And then you can have discussion.
Okay, so in the staff report, it does say that this is an event that's goes on and so on. This event was held for the first time last year. The event that was initiated by Miguel. I attended the event. It was a nice event. Basically, it was a panel. And it's going to be a similar event this year. And the Miguel general manager did a very nice job of moderating that panel. It was an extensive all afternoon discussion, raised some really interesting questions and back and forth that took place. There was representation on the panel. It was a big panel. It wasn't one or two or four people. It was like 15 people representing different interests from environmental community, the water community, regulators, general ratepayer interest, if you will. Anyway, they're very broad, and there was some very interesting discussion. And I think it will be similar this year. Whether we make an investment of $2,500 or not, this event's gonna go on, it's already planned, etc. I don't think that this is the type of event that we want to start supporting, especially when we're looking at having to deal with our budget and maybe revisiting these types of expenditures in the future. This is the second year that this event's gonna be held.
I'll speak if that's okay. Well, number one, I also attended that event last year. I thought it was excellent. Number two, this is of course in our current budget and it's budgeted. And we're at the end of the fiscal year and we still have funding. So I think it's a worthy endeavor, colleagues. I think they did a great job last year bringing a lot of partners together and hopefully that's what's going to happen this year. And so I support this.
Any other comments?
Nope.
Okay, then we'll take a vote.
Director Scott Houston,
Yes.
Director Don Deere,
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray, Director Harold Williams.
Extension.
Abstain. I thought you said same. Abstain. Director Desi Alvarez.
No.
The item fails.
Okay, we'll return to the budget discussion. And Director Deere, you're leaving us?
Unfortunately, I have to go, yes.
Okay, yes.
Well, thank you. Nice to be missed. Tomorrow? I promise tomorrow. 11.
Yes.
Thank you. Very good.
So can we turn to slide number 74? So this slide number 74 is just a further explain if, as Raquel mentioned, we have a priority project for next year. We also have other project for next year. So if we including district, the directors approving the staff to also work on the other project for next year, then the total funding required for next year is going to be the $29.1 million. So then in below this table, just kind of demonstrate how are we going to be funding the required of $29.1 million for next year. So once again, we're going to use our net revenue. We're going to use the 1% loan from the state of California. And then of course, we're going to be the other source of the money is either we're going to use our own cash or we just using the 30 million line credit. That's basically the funding options we have.
So I'd like to go back to kind of where we were before. Portion of the agenda. We should come back and review this, but again, with a further breakdown of these tables, so we can actually see, here's how much debt we have now, here's what our debt payment, here's where our additional debt's gonna be, there's additional debt payment. And then what happens when the standby charge drops? That's gonna be an additional expense that needs to be covered by a rate. I understand it's a few years out, but those years are gonna come really fast. We should be anticipating it so that we don't leave this problem kicked down the road for another board to have to deal with.
Well, like you just mentioned that in the last year, we're going to have a standby is going to be fiscal year 30. That was $7 million. In 31, if we lost the $7 million, that it require immediately for that particular year is $90 per acre feet potable water rate increase, right?
Mhm.
So if the board doesn't want to do that, I thinking we should increase the rate slowly every single year for the next 5 to 6 years.
I think that we need to look at something like that, Whitney. I agree. I want to really set this up so that we can actually see how we're gonna be able to face this. It's not an easy exercise, but we have to have, as you can see, in anticipation, start planning for that.
Yep.
And whether we do it by paying down debt now so that frees up cash in the future, or we do it by setting aside what I would call really a separate reserve fund that shouldn't be touched. Kind of like the college fund, but you can't dip into the college fund until your kids go to college. So that when that goes away, we have a way to pay for it. But we need to think about that. And we can't do it until we have really all the numbers very clear. So we need to come back at the next workshop. We may need 2 more workshops, I hate to say. As much time as these take, it's a real burden on us. But we do need to address this issue. I am very concerned about just kicking the can down the road, because the road is coming up really fast, or the end of the road.
So the other issue, I think we're currently become annual is we do not know, like, recycling water operation currently is running on deficit, right? So we do not know in the next year or next 3 to 5 years if we're going to be break even because we have this new agreement we're going to sign with refineries. So that is, if that is resolved, that could be actually saving us each year $5, $6 to $10 million,
We'll be freeing up some cash.
right?
And again, that cost of service study that we've been asking for, very critical, because that will allow us to really see where we need to be in order to recover our costs.
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. We will get you the debt schedule and our debt payments so that we can look at that and discuss that specifically. We owe you an updated presentation. This needs to be corrected as soon as possible. We'll get that out to you. I was hoping it would be done by the end of this meeting, but we will get that out to you today. We will get that posted on as an additional link on our website. I mentioned earlier in this meeting presentation that we've always planned for an as needed workshop on the 30th. I will have Desiree reach out to each of you to make sure that we can find time on that day to have that meeting. We are dedicated to getting this done within this fiscal year, so we will do additional workshops as needed, of course. And so we'll work with everyone's calendar as far as that goes. But we will bring back all of these items that you're requesting. As soon as possible, we'll get them to you, and then we'll be prepared to present them and discuss them at that meeting on the 30th.
On the meeting on the 30th, you said that we hadn't planned it, and maybe we didn't, and I just assumed to know, but I have that calendared already at 10 a.m.
We've always had it on your calendars, but it was as needed so that we didn't have a specific subject matter to cover. We just wanted to make sure that we had time with all of you to cover any loose ends and any updated items. So
I do have that meeting on my calendar at 10 a.m. I don't know if the rest of the board does, or
Thank
they
you.
want to check their calendar. But I think we may need 2 more meetings because I think.
That's fine.
This is gonna be really more sensitive, and then we're gonna, once we actually see all these numbers and try to figure out how we can set up a programmatic, approach to reaching 2030 without having to have a big rate increase all of a sudden. It's gonna be 2 meetings, I think. But I would like to see us be able to come up with a programmatic approach to getting there instead of kicking the can down the road. And that's why the concerns of, we really need to keep our expenses to a bare bone minimum. If we can operate at a certain level this year, and we're gonna continue to operate at that level with very minimal increases outside of externally driven ones. So that any rate increases that we pass through are gonna be not absorbed in operating budget, but there to start taking up the slack that we're gonna see in 7 years. 6 years, whatever.
Yeah, so we understand we need a, we needed to have, we're looking for more cash in the next few years, but I think the reasons, like, how are we going to accumulate those cash is either the board allow us to slowly every single year increase rate. The other way is we're going to continue to cut our costs. But then,
A combination of both.
yes, and then there will also be more decision on how are we going to be funding this construction project, right? We can cut the
That's
several
right.
millions,
That's all part of the discussion, Wendy, you're absolutely right.
right? So we can cut several millions, reducing, providing the service for our community from our operating expenses. But then if we are talking about our CIP project is 28 million, 30 million, so how are we supposed to talk?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, right quick. So I totally get where everyone's coming from. Or what you got, like, it's all on you, right? No. You know what? One of the things, though, that I think we should potentially consider is, I mean, look, we throw that extra dollar in per square foot, for example. I mean, I know we could look at like, oh, the sponsorship program, it's like $50,000, nothing. There's all these other things we want to nickel and dime, but there's bigger expenses. Like, we are putting that extra buck into all the grass is taken out, and people are already getting the $2 out of Met, for example. We don't have to throw the extra dollar in. Maybe we don't do the rain barrels anymore. I don't know how much that's costing us, and that's costing us almost 200,000 a year, I think.
Well,
You know,
go back through each of those if you'd like, but
I'm not saying I want to do that, but I will say the extra dollar may be something we could take away. If you want to save some cash, if you want to do some stuff right away, there's something potentially. Now, the other thing is, and I have not heard any discussion at all, of do we have any new recycled water projects even in the pipeline? Do we even have any new real lines that people are considering and coming asking us to build?
New customers?
Yeah.
A few,
Very few, right?
very few.
I hear nothing about any new lines or any new sources of revenue either, right? That's what I'm not hearing. Even if the board would consider approving them or not, that might be another story, but I'm just saying, we have been stagnant, it seems, with a lot of our projects.
Directors, we have a list of, I want to say, somewhere between 10 to 20 potential
Yes.
connections
Yes.
with developers here and there
Huh.
that have at one point or another over the last few years contacted us, inquired, or moved it along. We talked about it, only a few of them today.
Right.
There are, of course, ones that are underway, like the Chargers and the Clippers that are.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, a lot of these are either, sometimes hot, sometimes cold, as we said.
Yeah. I mean,
Reality is, we can't afford to build it.
well, I understand that, but So I think that, so I don't know that I don't know the answer. I'm told that we can't do it. But I mean, does nobody want recycled water anymore?
Well,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we get contacted regularly.
Yeah.
Our school districts,
Yeah.
all of which
You calling me?
surrounding our existing recycled water system, we provide them with analysis. The reality is that a lot of those will not take enough water to really make it affordable, even for them, because of the on-site retrofit that's required. There's some money from Met, of course, but not enough for the significant expense of getting the line to them. But we continue to provide them with the analysis in hopes that maybe if they had funding, or if they were able to go out and get Icelandic grants, then we could work with them. But we do have several different projects that have moved forward. Obviously, the San Diego Chargers facility, which the developer paid for. We do have the Intuit Center, the new Clippers Arena, which is going to be, I think, state of the art as far as what they do on site, treating the water and utilizing it there. We continue to work with anybody and everybody that contacts us. I think that the two new ones that you saw in there were the federal funding ones that you mentioned earlier, that Congresswoman Waters has helped us with. Again, we're going to go out and see if we can find additional funding, but regardless, we'll bring it back for a decision by the board of directors. So we're working on those. But yes, those projects are expensive. We're looking at the lateral now as a model. We've looked at others. Kenneth Hahn, is one that the community really wanted, but is cost prohibitive. So we'll continue to analyze every option to expand it. But the purple pipe projects, I think, are limited.
Just that we do, as soon as we get interest from somebody, what we do internally is prepare cost breakdown and the cost analysis and go back and sit down with it. A few months ago, we were approached by the city of Carson about potential sites, additional sites, and we prepared a cost estimate and internal analysis and went back and talked to the city and said, okay, here's what this thing would have to cost. This is how much funding we'd have to try to secure with the grants. Staff works to, wherever there is interest, to sit down and make sure that they understand what the costs are. And sometimes that moves it forward, and sometimes that stops it there.
So this was something in Carson, was it the city, or was it some private entity? And then this is in a holding pattern on their side.
It's as of, I think it was 8 months ago, it was a holding pattern.
The holding pattern for a lot longer than that.
Okay, go back to this. I think this all goes back to, remember, I think it's been a year or two, or maybe 3. I mean, it's probably been 3+ years, because Director Alvarez has been here. So the board still hasn't really put a policy position together when it comes to new recycled water lines. It's been piecemeal. Because we really have a mixed message from our own board and our staff and the public as to, are we building more recycled water lines or not?
Director Houston, I really want to make it very clear. There is no mixed message from our staff. Anybody that calls us, we analyze, we provide them with a very, I think, robust analysis of what it would take to deliver to them. And we have that individual conversation. I've worked with our operations team, and Frank Fuchs does an amazing job of putting it together very quickly to have those conversations, but no potential customer is denied that conversation. But we have a very real
Well, I would take that back. The way I would phrase it is, well, you all might do your due diligence, which is great, because we don't have a policy that says go forward or not. So people are calling, people are asking, and we're going through the motions, even though, quite frankly, if it got to the board, it may go nowhere. So I do think that this is something that the board has got to decide. Because right now, I do have people all the time saying, oh, we'd like recycled water here. Why can't we do it there? Da, 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 da. Now, they don't know the intricacies of how this works and how expensive it is and complicated. And so now we're already getting to the place where we're going to say, no, we're not going to build no more. We're not going to do this and that. Well, then we probably got to be pretty firm with people who come asking and just say no up front. So I guess to my colleagues, I'm saying that should be part of our discussion. Because why are we misleading people that there's these options anymore? I mean, we're dealing with the financials on this. You know, and if people want to step up and pay that cost, then by all means, we can make that recycled water happen to them. I hope we could if they'll pay. But we shouldn't be going through the motions if this board ultimately would say, no, we're not going to do it. And I don't know, and actually it's a great question. I've understood that LADWP in some areas is no longer going forward with recycled water projects. At least that's part of what I was of the understanding
In all areas.
in all areas.
They
So they say no to
they
everything.
said it a long time ago.
So quite frankly, we actually need to have this discussion because if DWP is saying no, and I don't know what some of our other neighboring agencies are doing, right? I have no clue. Like, you know, ones that are much more robust also on recycled, like some of the ones in Orange County, et cetera. Are they at this point saying, no, we're not doing it? Or are they going forward still? Because obviously we're thinking about the future of DPR as well. So it goes back to, we need some better instructions for our staff to abide by if people come asking. Because I really, look, when people reach out to me, I always put them in touch with EJ and the team. You know, and you all take on that challenge or not. But I think we need to be realistic. Because if we're going to, again, look at cutting things right and left inside the agency, but also where are those opportunities potentially to get more water sales, more revenue, and that makes sense for our system. You know, I don't want to say no to everybody. I mean, there are pockets of this region that we could still add small lines to, I'm assuming. So anyway, I don't know, you know, I don't know how you're all going to figure this out, but I think at some point, Mr. President, we have to have that policy discussion so that, you know, we all kind of know the rules of the road for this agency.
So, very good points, Director Houston. I think that discussion is probably gonna start with this budget. You're gonna be seeing what you can and can't afford. But a couple of comments, if I may. There are no agencies that are really, building purple pipe. LADWP for quite a while ago, just, realized that it just was too expensive to do and there was no return on investment. That would ever be realized. It didn't pay for itself, so they would be subsidized, heavily subsidized. I think that we found the same thing. The other agency that, or in these parts anyways, that build purple pipe and they haven't built any in a long time, is Central Basin. And, they have looked at kicking in a couple of new projects, that were designed, 5 years ago now. And those designs have been, shelved. The designs were 100% paid for by the state, so it didn't cost Central Basin any money. That's why those designs get done. And they're, if they're going to implement those, they are looking for funding again for the same reason that, they don't generate the revenue to pay for the project. And I think in Orange County, I don't know anybody right now that's investing in it. It's just, everybody's realized that it's for the cost of the purple pipe and the amount of money that, it generates in terms of revenue, that the sales don't cover the cost and that the cost of the water to produce is very expensive. Okay, any other comments? Otherwise, do you need more? Do we have any more questions for our next budget workshop?
So as far as you're talking about, maybe we want to have a reserve fund for, prepare for the fiscal year 31 loss of $7 million. Do you want to, the projection of how are we going to do that for the next 10 years?
Yeah, we want to, I would like to see, and I think the board needs to see, a breakdown really of, here's our expenses. Here's our debt today, our debt in the future, how we may be taking on more debt. Where our additional expenditures are gonna come from, and then what's gonna happen to our revenue. we lose that $7 million a year, which you're right, about $90. Just, if we lost that this year and we did nothing, we'd have to raise our rates $90.
Okay,
We'll prepare something. We'll get that out before the workshop.
Yeah.
In order for you to
It
work.
require work. I know I said it in about 30 seconds, and it's a lot of work. I appreciate it. But
Okay.
if you understand, and if not, just ask questions.
We'll do it.
so are we moving to slide number 48, which is the last slide?
I think we're basically done.
We're done, okay.
It's just the same question. So we'll move on to director's comments.
All right, well,
Jake,
I'll start, I guess, if no one else will. Well, first of all, thank you very much, and thank you for entertaining questions and whatnot. Because you know what, we're all in this boat, listening, taking it in. You all work here daily, you know this inside and out much better than most of us sitting up here. And our business model is changing very quickly. So what I do understand is, and I have some really grave concerns, because you know, we love our recycled water. We love that purple pipe. We love all the things that we do at Ed C. Little. And our residents, our businesses, constituents do not understand the internal things that we are dealing with at this moment. And I don't know how we're going to articulate that, but I think we need to get together and have a plan to articulate that. Because right now, the common wisdom out there is you guys should be building more purple pipe. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. Of course, they want us to capture the stormwater. They want us to do this, that, and the other thing, right? A number of items that are not even in our jurisdiction. But I do think we need to have some realistic answers for folks when these requests come to us, whether it's a director, it's a staff member, it's whomever. We need to be able to have some answers back. Because I think, and this is why, you know what, I'm just literally having revelations up here. I'm saying if DLBP is doing a certain thing and other agencies may be in that space too, I mean, they all have probably figured out how they're answering that question to folks. And we need to have something on our side to articulate it. Because it just seems to me the future of the purple pipe is going away. But we need to figure out how do we express that to folks. And or how long are we going to potentially maintain just the system as it is? It's just status quo, and that's it. We're not doing anything more. So, and the only other thing I can see, of course, is obviously it's a groundwater replenishment, right? That's where we have opportunities potentially for better volumetric recycled water sales. Is how do we do more groundwater replenishment, perhaps? So I think that we need to look at those ideas. And EJ, I think that somehow we need to come up with answers for constituents about where we are on purple pipe. Thank you very much.
William, you coming?
No, just, nope, thank you.
Okay, I'm looking forward, actually, I'm not looking forward to that. Very challenging and very controversial, emotional discussions that we are gonna have to face. But it is a necessary discussion that needs to occur. And I think we need to have a really good basis for understanding the positions that we're in and what the implications of any actions that we take on. And they're very significant right now. So I'll be back here in 2 weeks. And twice that week probably, because we'll have a regular board meeting on the 27th. Or the 28th? 29th. And then we'll have a workshop following day. Okay, all right, with that, unless there's anything else, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.